The late afternoon sun cast long, lazy shadows across the manicured lawn as Eleanor pulled her car into the driveway of her son Marcus's home. It was an impulse visit, one born of a vague maternal unease that had been gnawing at her for weeks. She hadn't called ahead, preferring to just pop in and surprise them. Lillian, Marcus's wife, was 7 months pregnant with Eleanor's first grandchild, and Eleanor longed to see her to make sure everything was all right. She usually found the house bustling, or at least heard the faint hum of life within its walls, but today an eerie quiet settled over the place. Letting herself in with the spare key Marcus had given her years ago, Eleanor called out, "Hello? Anyone home?" Her voice echoed in the silent foyer. A faint, almost imperceptible sound drew her toward the kitchen. As she rounded the corner, her breath hitched, and a gasp caught in her throat. There, on the gleaming cold tile floor of the kitchen, was Lillian. Her advanced pregnancy made the sight even more grotesque. She was on her hands and knees, a position that must have been incredibly uncomfortable, if not painful, for someone so heavily pregnant. Before her, a scattered mess of what looked like rice and some kind of stew lay spread across the floor. And Lillian, her face streaked with tears, was slowly, meticulously, picking up pieces of the food with her fingers and bringing them to her mouth. She was eating off the floor. Her usually vibrant eyes were downcast, shadowed by shame and a deep, crushing despair. Just as the full horror of the scene registered, a burst of loud, careless laughter erupted from the adjacent dining room. It was Marcus's booming voice, easily distinguishable, followed by the sharper, more acerbic tones of his mother, Deborah, and the lighter, mocking giggle of his sister, Bethany. The sound was a cruel counterpoint to the silent misery unfolding in the kitchen, like a discordant symphony of callous indifference. Eleanor felt a surge of cold fury, sharp and sudden. "Lillian!" she cried, rushing forward. Her heart ached at the sight of her daughter-in-law, looking so vulnerable and degraded. Lillian flinched, startled, her head snapping up. Her eyes, wide and bloodshot, met Eleanor's for a fleeting moment, before she quickly tried to scramble to her feet, desperate to hide her humiliation. The movement was clumsy, hindered by her swollen belly, and Eleanor reached her just in time to steady her, guiding her gently upright. Before Eleanor could demand an explanation from Lillian, Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, a casual smile plastered on his face. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. They were cold, devoid of the warmth Eleanor remembered, like chips of glacial ice. His gaze slid past Lillian and landed on Eleanor. "Eleanor," he said, his voice flat, completely omitting the familiar mom or even mother. The omission was a subtle cut, a stark indicator that something was terribly wrong. "Marcus, what in God's name is going on here?" Eleanor demanded, her voice tight with suppressed rage. She gestured wildly towards the scattered food on the floor. Why was Lillian on her knees eating food off the floor? What kind of behavior is this? Marcus merely shrugged, a picture of nonchalant indifference. "Oh, Lillian was just being clumsy again," he explained, as if discussing a minor household inconvenience. "She made a mess, and she needs to clean it up. Simple as that." He spoke with an air of complete authority, his words laced with a condescension that made Eleanor's blood boil. Eleanor turned her gaze back to Lillian. Her daughter-in-law stood beside her, her shoulders hunched, refusing to meet Eleanor's eye. Lillian darted a quick, nervous glance at Marcus, her face paling slightly, before murmuring, "Yes, I was clumsy. I dropped my plate." Her voice was barely a whisper, thin and reedy, completely lacking conviction. Eleanor knew with a mother's instinct that it was an outright lie. The fear in Lillian's eyes was palpable, a silent plea for Eleanor to not push further, to not escalate the situation. Marcus stepped further into the kitchen, his posture radiating an unnerving possessiveness. "Lillian can handle it," he asserted, his voice gaining a hard edge. "She made the mess. She cleans it. This is our house, Eleanor. Lillian knows what she needs to do." He emphasized "our house," a subtle but potent declaration of dominion, not just over the physical space, but over Lillian herself. The implication was clear. This was his domain, and his wife was his to command, beyond the purview of any outside interference, even from his own mother. But Eleanor wasn't easily deterred. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, scanned the kitchen floor. It wasn't just a simple spill. Amidst the scattered rice and stew, she noticed several distinct muddy footprints, tracked across the gleaming tiles, leading from the back door and stopping abruptly where the food lay. And next to the food, glinting among the debris, lay a shard of a ceramic dinner plate, its pattern familiar from a set Eleanor had given them as a wedding gift. It was a clean break, not the result of a gentle slip. This wasn't an accident. This was something far more deliberate, far more cruel. The mud, the broken plate, it spoke of an intentional act, a forceful tossing, perhaps, or a deliberate destruction. It wasn't clumsiness. It was subjugation. A knot of dread tightened in Eleanor's stomach. Before she could voice her new realization, Marcus was already moving, subtly but firmly guiding her towards the foyer. "We were just about to finish up dinner, Eleanor," he said, his tone still outwardly polite but undeniably dismissive. "I'll walk you out." He didn't offer coffee, didn't suggest she stay, didn't even ask why she had come. It was a clear, unspoken order to leave. Lillian remained rooted in the kitchen, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and, oddly, a strange defensiveness. She didn't protest Eleanor's departure. Instead, she seemed to shrink into herself, as if trying to disappear. Her silence, her averted gaze, spoke volumes, suggesting a terror of repercussions once Eleanor was gone. Eleanor, despite her fierce maternal instincts urging her to stay, felt a cold wave of helplessness wash over her. Marcus was too calm, too controlled, too subtly menacing. She allowed him to escort her to the door, but her mind was reeling. As she stepped out into the twilight, the laughter from the dining room seemed to follow her, colder and more sinister now. She got into her car, her hands trembling as she started the engine. The image of Lillian, pregnant and humiliated, eating off the floor, was seared into her memory. A powerful, unnamed enemy resided in that house, an insidious presence that was slowly suffocating Lillian. Eleanor knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that this was just the beginning. The days following Eleanor's unsettling visit dragged by in a haze of mounting anxiety. She waited, phone clutched in hand, for a call from Lillian. One ring, one text, anything to indicate that her daughter-in-law was all right, or even to confirm the nightmare Eleanor had witnessed was just a figment of her overactive imagination. But no call came. The silence from Lillian's end was deafening, a heavy confirmation of Eleanor's worst fears. It wasn't just Lillian's shame Eleanor had seen, it was her terror, a silent plea for discretion that now seemed to bind her to silence. This lack of communication, so out of character for the usually warm and communicative Lillian, solidified Eleanor's growing conviction that something truly sinister was at play. A few days later, Eleanor found herself in the produce aisle of their local upscale grocery store, her mind still preoccupied with Lillian. As she reached for a ripe avocado, a familiar, slightly shrill voice carried across the bins of organic vegetables. It was Deborah, Marcus's mother, holding court near the artisanal cheese section. She was animatedly conversing with another woman, a neighbor Eleanor vaguely recognized from community events. Eleanor instinctively paused, half hidden by a display of exotic fruits, a prickle of intuition guiding her to listen. Deborah, a woman known for her meticulously maintained appearance and equally meticulously curated social facade, was in full flow. "Oh, Lillian, bless her heart," Deborah began, her tone laced with a theatrical sigh that suggested anything but blessing. "This pregnancy has made her quite challenging, so dramatic, always exaggerating everything." She paused for dramatic effect, allowing the other woman to nod in sympathetic agreement. "And clumsy. My goodness, you wouldn't believe the messes she makes. Just last week, she dropped an entire dinner plate of food all over the kitchen floor. Marcus, poor dear, he has the patience of a saint." Eleanor felt a cold dread spread through her veins. This wasn't merely gossip. It was a deliberate narrative, carefully constructed to paint Lillian in the worst possible light. Deborah continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, though Eleanor could still clearly hear every word. "Marcus, being the wonderful husband he is, he's been trying to teach her some character building. You see, sometimes when she's particularly messy or forgetful, he insists she clean it up herself. He made her clean up that dinner mess right there on the floor, said it would help her appreciate the effort that goes into cooking and keeping a tidy home. So good for her, really. She just needs a firm hand sometimes, especially with the baby coming. The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Deborah's casual confession, delivered with a smile and a shrug, confirmed everything. Character building. That was the family's twisted justification for the humiliation Eleanor had witnessed. They weren't just ignoring Marcus's cruelty, they were actively endorsing it, rebranding it as a form of benevolent discipline. Eleanor's hands trembled as she clutched a bag of apples. They were twisting the narrative, systematically making Lillian out to be the problem, the one deserving of Marcus's lessons. The entire family, it seemed, was complicit in this insidious game, turning a blind eye or worse, actively participating in Lillian's degradation. A fierce resolve ignited within Eleanor. She couldn't stand by and do nothing. Her initial fear for Lillian transformed into a steely determination. She had to understand the extent of this cruelty, to peel back the layers of deception and control. The silent calls, the public shaming, the blatant lies, it all pointed to something far deeper than a simple domestic dispute. In the days that followed, Eleanor began a new clandestine routine. She would park her car a block or two away from Marcus and Lillian's house, finding a discreet spot where she could observe without being seen. She felt like a spy, a role she never imagined she'd play, but the stakes were too high. She watched their movements, the comings and goings, the subtle shifts in their daily rhythm. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Eleanor sat in her car pretending to read a book, she saw Lillian emerge from the front door. Her step was slow, almost reluctant, as she made her way to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. Her pregnant belly was more pronounced now, making every movement seem like an effort. She retrieved the mail and started back towards the house, when the front door suddenly flung open. Marcus stood framed in the doorway, his face a thundercloud. "What is taking you so long, Lillian?" Marcus's voice, though not overtly loud, carried clearly in the quiet neighborhood, sharp with barely concealed irritation. "Were you going to take all day just to get the mail? And have you even thought about dinner yet? It's almost 5 o'clock, and I expect a hot meal on the table when I get home from work." Lillian flinched, visibly shrinking back. She clutched the bundle of mail to her chest, her eyes wide and fearful. "I'm sorry, Marcus," she murmured, her voice barely audible even to Eleanor, who was straining to hear. I was just a little slow today, and yes, I was just about to start dinner, I promise." Her usual confident posture was gone, replaced by a nervous, almost supplicant stance. Her head was bowed, her shoulders hunched, a stark contrast to the vibrant, independent woman Eleanor had come to adore. Eleanor watched, her heart clenching. Lillian's submissive replies, her fearful demeanor, confirmed Eleanor's deepest fears. This wasn't the Lillian she knew. Her daughter-in-law had always been so full of life, so independent, so capable. Now she was a shadow of her former self, trapped and cowering. The casual cruelty in Marcus's tone, the way he spoke to her as if she were a recalcitrant child, ignited a cold, righteous anger in Eleanor. It became chillingly clear to Eleanor that Marcus wasn't just being difficult. He was systematically breaking Lillian down, isolating her from anyone who might offer support. He was controlling her, not just physically within the house, but mentally and emotionally. The character building was a facade for something far more sinister: abuse. Eleanor knew she had to act, and fast. She had to uncover what had truly changed in Marcus's life, what demons had possessed her son, and most importantly, how she could free Lillian from this suffocating nightmare. The realization that Marcus was systematically isolating Lillian gnawed at Eleanor. The immediate next step was obvious. Connect with Lillian's closest confidants. Eleanor's mind immediately went to Chloe Miller, Lillian's vivacious best friend from college. They had been inseparable, sharing secrets and laughter, always there for each other. Eleanor remembered Chloe being a bridesmaid at Lillian's wedding, full of joy and promises of lifelong friendship. Dialing Chloe's number, Eleanor felt a pang of apprehension. What if Chloe had also been pushed away? The phone rang several times before a cheerful, though slightly guarded voice answered. "Chloe Miller," she said. "Chloe, it's Eleanor, Lillian's mother-in-law," Eleanor began, her voice a little strained. There was a moment of surprised silence on the other end. Eleanor, it's good to hear from you. I hope everything's all right. The question was infused with a hesitant concern that Eleanor recognized instantly. Chloe, I need to ask you something very important, Eleanor said, skipping pleasantries. When was the last time you spoke to Lillian? A sigh, heavy with resignation, came through the phone. Honestly, Eleanor, it's been about 6 months now. Maybe even a little more. I've tried calling and texting, but she barely responds. If she does, it's short, cryptic messages, always saying she's busy. Eleanor's fears solidified. Did she give you a reason for pulling away? Or did Marcus say anything? Oh, Marcus, Chloe said, a note of exasperation in her voice. He was very clear. He told me that Lillian needed to focus on her marriage and the baby. He said she was getting distracted by outside influences and that her priorities needed to shift. He even suggested that my friendship was somehow keeping her from being a proper wife and mother. It was ridiculous, frankly. I tried to push back, but Lillian just went quiet. Chloe recounted their last attempted lunch date, a memory that now seemed chillingly significant. We met up for coffee, probably 6 or 7 months ago. Lillian was different, quiet. She seemed constantly anxious, kept checking her phone every few minutes. Not in a checking for important messages way, but more like a nervous tick, almost as if she expected to be monitored. She barely touched her latte. Then, barely an hour into our conversation, Marcus showed up completely unannounced. He just walked in, said Lillian had forgotten an important appointment and needed to leave. He didn't even look at me, just took her hand and pulled her out. No explanation, no apologies. Lillian just looked down, barely said goodbye, and left with him. It was so unlike her. I haven't really seen or properly heard from her since. Eleanor listened, her grip tightening on the phone. It was a classic pattern. First the friends, then the family. The isolation was deliberate, methodical. Marcus was slowly but surely severing Lillian's connections to the outside world, making her entirely dependent on him. The subtle hints, the casual dismissals of her friends, the claims of needing to focus. It was all part of a calculated strategy to control. After hanging up with Chloe, Eleanor walked to the living room, her eyes drawn to a framed photograph on the mantelpiece. Lillian and Marcus on their wedding day. They were smiling, radiant with happiness. But as Eleanor looked closer, a detail she'd never noticed before now stood out starkly. Marcus's hand, resting on the small of Lillian's back, was not a gentle, supportive touch. It was possessive, almost gripping. His fingers splayed wide, asserting a subtle control even in that moment of joy. It was a small thing, easily missed, but now it screamed volumes. The pattern of isolation, the manipulation of narratives, the possessive gestures, it was all weaving into a terrifying tapestry. Eleanor sat down, a cold resolve hardening in her heart. She wasn't just worried about Lillian anymore. She was determined to expose Marcus. What kind of person would do this to his pregnant wife? What secrets lay hidden beneath his charming facade? She knew she had to dig deeper. She had to research Marcus Thorne. She spent the next several hours glued to her laptop, performing every kind of online search imaginable. Marcus Thorne, Marcus Anthony Thorne. She searched for his education, his previous arms, anything that could give her a clearer picture of the man her son had become. She found nothing particularly damning at first, just the usual online profiles, some professional accolades, a LinkedIn page. But as she delved deeper, using different search terms and cross-referencing information, she started noticing gaps, inconsistencies, places he'd lived, periods of employment that didn't quite line up. It was like looking at a meticulously constructed facade, with tiny cracks beginning to appear. Then, tucked away on the third page of search results for an obscure local newspaper in a neighboring state, a small headline caught her eye: "Local man arrested for harassment and restraining order violation." Her heart pounded as she clicked the link. The article was old, dated 5 years prior, but the name leapt out at her: Marcus Anthony Thorne, 27. The age matched. The location was a town Eleanor knew Marcus had claimed to live in briefly before moving to their current city. The details were sparse but horrifying. Marcus had been arrested following a complaint filed by a woman named Sofia Mendez. The article stated she was his wife, Marcus had never mentioned being married before Lillian. Never. His past was a blank slate where a wife should have been. The complaint had been for harassment in violating a restraining order. Eleanor's blood ran cold. The comfortable warmth of her living room vanished, replaced by an icy dread that seeped into her bones. A wife he never mentioned. A restraining order. Harassment. Lillian, her sweet, pregnant Lillian, was not just in a bad marriage. She was living with a man with a hidden past. A man who had already demonstrated a pattern of controlling and potentially dangerous behavior. Eleanor realized with a sickening certainty that Lillian was in far more danger than she had ever imagined. The game had just changed. The revelation of Sofia Mendez, a wife Marcus had never mentioned, sent a jolt of terror through Eleanor. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, fueled by a frantic urgency. The initial shock transformed into a cold, unwavering determination to uncover every dark secret Marcus harbored. One wife was bad enough, but her mother's intuition screamed that there was more. She expanded her search parameters, digging into public records, court documents, and old social media profiles linked to Marcus Anthony Thorne. What she found next was a sickening descent into a rabbit hole of deceit. Sofia Mendez was not his only secret wife. Eleanor unearthed records of a first marriage to an Emily Watson, ending just a few years before Marcus had met Sofia. Like Sofia, Emily had also filed a restraining order against Marcus, citing harassment and emotional abuse. Two previous wives, both with restraining orders, both erased from his carefully crafted history. It was a chilling pattern, one that painted a portrait of a serial abuser. The horror deepened as Eleanor discovered that both Sofia and Emily had children with Marcus. 2 children from 2 separate marriages whom he had completely abandoned. The records were clear, court orders for child support, subsequently followed by a long, grim history of default notices. Marcus, her charming, successful son, the seemingly devoted husband to Lillian, was in reality a serial abandoner of families. He was a man who effortlessly slipped from one life to the next, leaving behind a trail of broken promises, unpaid debts, and discarded children. The total amount of overdue child support payments listed across both cases was staggering, over $37,000, accumulating with interest. His polished facade as a burgeoning marketing executive was nothing more than an elaborate disguise for a life built on evasion and emotional wreckage. Just as Eleanor felt the weight of this horrifying discovery settling upon her, her phone rang. It was Lillian. Eleanor's heart leapt with a mix of relief and renewed anxiety. "Lillian, honey, how are you?" Lillian's voice was hollow, stripped of its usual warmth, thin and reedy. "Eleanor, I just wanted to call. Marcus feels that your visits are stressing me out. With the baby coming and everything, he thinks I need to reduce my stress. So he asked if you could maybe not come over for a while and keep phone calls to a minimum." Eleanor felt a cold wave wash over her. It was exactly what she had feared. Marcus was tightening his grip, using Lillian's pregnancy and health as a weapon, a convenient excuse to cut off her last remaining link to the outside world. He wasn't suggesting. He was demanding. He was manipulating Lillian into becoming his mouthpiece, making her deliver the cruel message of her own isolation. "Stressing you out, honey?" Eleanor asked gently, trying to keep her voice steady. "Are you feeling okay? You sound so tired." "I am," Lillian admitted, a fragile sigh escaping her lips. "Tired all the time. Everything feels hard lately. Marcus says it's normal for pregnancy, but I don't know." Her voice trailed off, a subtle tremble in its undertone. Eleanor sensed the unspoken words, the fear that choked Lillian's ability to speak freely. Lillian was afraid not just of Marcus's displeasure, but perhaps of much worse. The knowledge of Marcus's past made Lillian's fear all the more terrifying. The call ended abruptly, leaving Eleanor with a sense of suffocating helplessness. Marcus had successfully orchestrated another layer of isolation. Eleanor knew she couldn't confront Marcus directly. He would simply deny everything, twist the narrative further, and cut Lillian off entirely. She needed proof, irrefutable evidence of his true nature. It was in that moment, the phone still warm in her hand, that Eleanor made a life-changing decision. She would fight fire with fire, or rather deception with investigation. She wasn't going to stand by while her son destroyed another life. She needed professional help. She searched online for private investigators specializing in domestic situations, eventually settling on a firm with excellent reviews and a discreet, compassionate approach. The next morning, Eleanor found herself across a polished mahogany desk from a man named Thomas Reed. He was an older gentleman, with kind eyes but a sharp, analytical mind. Eleanor laid out everything: the kitchen floor incident, Deborah's casual remarks, Chloe's testimony, and the horrifying discovery of Marcus's previous marriages, restraining orders, and abandoned children. Thomas listened patiently, his expression unwavering. When Eleanor finished, a grim look settled on his face. "Mrs. Thorne," he began, his voice low and serious, "what you've described fits a very specific pattern of coercive control and serial abandonment. The charming facade, the rapid escalation of control, the isolation tactics, the financial irresponsibility, the past restraining orders. It's all textbook. These individuals are extremely dangerous because they appear so normal, even charismatic, to outsiders." He paused, leaning forward slightly. "I can certainly take on this case, but I have to warn you, what we might uncover could be even worse than what you've already found. These patterns rarely improve. They tend to escalate. Are you prepared for that?" Eleanor met his gaze, her own eyes resolute. "I am, Thomas. I have to be. Lillian and my grandchild are in danger. I need to get them out. The story you're hearing is just the tip of the iceberg, a journey into deception and discovery that will shake you to your core. Don't miss a single detail of Eleanor's fight for justice and the truth. Keep watching, like this video, share it with anyone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to follow this incredible story to its conclusion." Just a week later, Thomas Reed summoned Eleanor back to his office. The neat stack of documents and printouts he presented before her seemed impossibly thin for the dark, sprawling story they contained. Yet as he began to speak, Eleanor quickly understood that the file represented years of meticulously documented predatory behavior, a chilling testament to Marcus's true nature. "We found both Sophia Mendez and Emily Watson," Thomas began, his voice devoid of emotion, simply stating the facts. "It took some delicate maneuvering, but they were willing to speak once they understood the severity of the situation with Lillian. Their stories are tragically similar." He explained how Sophia Mendez, Marcus's second wife, had eventually fled with her twin daughters to a women's shelter, fearing for their safety and her own sanity. She had endured months of intense psychological abuse, where Marcus systematically dismantled her self-worth, convincing her she was mentally unstable and incapable of functioning without him. He had exerted complete financial control, leaving her isolated and dependent, and his threats had escalated, becoming increasingly menacing. Sophia described how Marcus had meticulously gaslighted her, making her doubt her own perceptions and memories, always twisting reality to fit his narrative. She had barely escaped with her children, leaving everything else behind. Then came Emily Watson, his first wife. Her story was even more harrowing in its protracted cruelty. Marcus had isolated Emily completely, moving her cross-country, away from her family and friends, severing all her lifelines. He then systematically convinced her she was worthless, chipping away at her confidence until she believed every cruel word he uttered. It took her nearly 3 years after escaping him to fully rebuild her life, to find her voice again, to believe in her own strength. Eleanor could barely comprehend the depth of this depravity. This wasn't just a controlling man. This was a calculated, insidious predator. Both women, despite the trauma they had endured, independently described the same horrifying pattern in Marcus's behavior. It always began subtly, small, seemingly insignificant criticisms designed to chip away at self-esteem. This would escalate into public humiliation, often disguised as playful teasing. Then came the insidious control over money, gradually taking over accounts, limiting access, and scrutinizing every expense. Social connections were severed, friends deemed bad influences, family contacts discouraged. And chillingly, both women reported a marked increase in Marcus's cruelty and controlling behavior during their pregnancies. It was as if their vulnerability, their physical and emotional changes, presented him with an amplified opportunity to exert dominance. Thomas then explained the chilling psychology behind this pattern. Pregnant women are, unfortunately, incredibly vulnerable targets for men like Marcus, he said, his gaze direct and empathetic. The hormonal changes, the physical discomfort, the emotional sensitivity, the societal expectation of needing a partner. These all create an ideal environment for a predator to thrive. They see pregnancy not as a shared journey, but as an opportunity to increase control, to fully incapacitate their victim, both physically and emotionally, ensuring complete dependence before the child arrives. Eleanor's mind flashed back to the image of Lillian, 7 months pregnant, on her knees eating off the cold kitchen floor. The shame, the tears, the absolute degradation. It wasn't a random act of cruelty. It was a deliberate, calculated move designed to break her, to cement his control during her most vulnerable state. The timing was no coincidence. It was part of his pattern. The realization sent a fresh wave of nausea through Eleanor. The investigation wasn't just focused on his past relationships. Thomas's team had also delved into Marcus's financial activities since his marriage to Lillian. The findings were devastating. Marcus has systematically siphoned off a significant portion of Lillian's personal savings, Thomas revealed, pushing a new set of documents across the table. Approximately $43,000. He's moved it into accounts solely in his name, making it incredibly difficult for Lillian to access or even trace. Eleanor stared at the bank statements, the figures blurring before her eyes. $43,000. Lillian had worked hard for that money, saving diligently for their future, for their child. It was gone. And it gets worse, Thomas continued grimly. We've uncovered evidence that Marcus has also taken out a substantial line of credit against their house, without Lillian's knowledge or consent, from what we can tell. There are some suspicious inconsistencies in the signatures on the loan documents. It's highly probable he manipulated or forged her signature. Eleanor felt a cold, hard knot form in her stomach. It wasn't just emotional abuse, not just psychological manipulation, not just control and isolation. Marcus was systematically stealing from Lillian, bleeding her dry financially, turning her own assets against her. He wasn't just a cruel husband. He was a thief, a fraud, a criminal. The full scope of his depravity was now undeniable, exposed in the cold, hard facts of the investigation. Lillian was trapped, financially vulnerable, emotionally broken, and pregnant. Eleanor knew with absolute certainty that she had to act, and fast. The chilling discoveries from Thomas Reed's investigation left Eleanor with a burning fury she could barely contain. Marcus was not just emotionally abusive, he was a calculated predator, a financial fraud, and a danger to Lillian and her unborn grandchild. She couldn't wait any longer. Despite Thomas's advice to gather more evidence before confronting Marcus, Eleanor's maternal instincts overruled caution. She picked up her phone and dialed Marcus's number. His voice was smooth, deceptively normal when he answered. Eleanor, to what do I owe the pleasure? Eleanor didn't waste a second on pleasantries. Her voice, though trembling slightly with rage, was firm. Marcus, I know about Phoenix. I know about Sophia and Emily, and I know about the restraining orders. There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end, a silence that spoke volumes. The charming facade crumbled, replaced by a cold, venomous hiss. What are you talking about? He spat, a dangerous edge entering his tone. Stay out of my life, Eleanor. This has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me, Eleanor retorted, her voice rising. You are hurting Lillian, and I won't stand by and let you destroy another family. I know your pattern, Marcus. His next words were laced with pure malice, cutting through the phone line like a razor. Listen to me, Eleanor. You stay away from my family. You stay away from Lillian. If you try to interfere, if you try to turn her against me, you will lose her forever. And you will never, ever see your grandchild. Do you understand? The threat hung heavy in the air, a chilling promise that Eleanor knew he was capable of fulfilling. He hung up abruptly, leaving Eleanor staring at her phone, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and absolute defiance. The next morning, Eleanor was jolted awake by her phone ringing incessantly. It was Lillian, her voice a raw, desperate sob, barely coherent through her hysterics. Mom, oh Mom, you have to help me. Lillian, darling, what is it? What's wrong? Eleanor asked, her own heart leaping into her throat. I found it! I found it in his study, Lillian cried, gasping for breath. A life insurance policy, on me, for $500,000. And Marcus is the sole beneficiary. Oh God, Mom, what does this mean? Her panic was infectious, chilling Eleanor to the bone. $500,000. The implication was sickening. And that's not all, Lillian continued, her voice trembling violently. I found a will. It's seemingly signed by me, leaving everything to Marcus. But Mom, I don't remember signing this. I don't understand it. He said it was just routine paperwork for the baby, hospital forms, legal documents for our joint accounts. He told me I didn't need to worry about the details, that he would handle all the boring financial stuff because I was bad with money and needed to focus on my health. I trusted him. Eleanor's blood ran cold. The insurance policy, the will, it was a premeditated scheme, a horrifying escalation. Marcus had manipulated Lillian's trust, her pregnancy, and her proclaimed inability with finances to secure his future should anything happen to her. He was not just controlling her, he was planning for her demise. Lillian, listen to me very carefully, Eleanor said, trying to keep her voice calm and steady, despite her own mounting terror. You are in extreme danger. Marcus has a history, a very dark history. He was married before you twice, to Sophia Mendez and Emily Watson. Both of them filed restraining orders against him for harassment and abuse, and he abandoned children with both of them. He never paid child support. This is his pattern, Lillian. He isolates, he controls, he financially abuses, and then he moves on, leaving a trail of destruction. Lillian's sobbing stopped, replaced by a stunned silence. No, she whispered, a desperate denial in her voice. No, Marcus wouldn't. He loves me. He told me everything about his past. He said he'd only been in one serious relationship before me, and it ended badly because she was mentally unstable and demanding. He lied, Lillian, Eleanor insisted, her voice firm. He has been lying to you all along. Do you remember me seeing you on the kitchen floor? Supposedly because you were clumsy. Do you remember him pushing you away from your friends, telling you to focus on your marriage? Do you remember him moving you off the joint accounts, telling you he'd give you an allowance because you were bad with money? Slowly, agonizingly, Lillian's denials began to crumble. The fragments of her memory, the subtle acts of control she had dismissed or rationalized, began to coalesce into a terrifying mosaic of truth. She started sobbing again, but this time it was different. It was the sound of a woman awakening to a nightmare. He does, Lillian confessed, her voice thick with tears and a dawning horror. He controls what I eat. He criticizes my clothes. He stopped me from seeing Chloe and everyone else. He took me off all the joint accounts, like he did with my savings. He gives me a small allowance now. He said it was for my own good, to help me budget, to make sure I focused on the baby. Lillian, Eleanor said, her voice heavy with sorrow. Marcus also stole your entire inheritance from your father. The $43,000. It's gone, moved into his private accounts. The final blow landed, shattering Lillian's remaining illusions. A guttural cry of anguish escaped her lips. Her father's legacy, the last tangible link to him, had been stolen. The depth of Marcus's betrayal was now complete, but amidst the despair, a spark of resolve flickered within Lillian. What do I do, Mom? She asked, her voice still broken, but now tinged with a desperate plea for action. Please tell me what to do. Eleanor took a deep breath. We fight back, honey. We expose him. Here's what we're going to do. You have to pretend everything is normal. Act like nothing has changed. Don't let him see that you know. Meanwhile, Thomas and I will work tirelessly to gather every piece of evidence, every detail of his hidden assets, every shred of his criminal past. We will build an airtight case, and then, when the time is right, we will strike. We will get you and my grandchild out of there, Lillian. I promise you. 2 weeks before Lillian's due date, a time that should have been filled with joyful anticipation, Eleanor received a chilling call from Thomas Reed. His voice was urgent, devoid of his usual calm demeanor. Eleanor, we have a critical development. Marcus is planning to leave town, and quickly. Eleanor's heart dropped. Leave? When? Where? We've confirmed he's been liquidating assets, emptying accounts, shifting funds, Thomas explained, his words rapid fire. We're looking at over $120,000 in cash and transfers. He's also taken out several new credit cards, all in Lillian's name, maxing them out. And this is the most alarming part. He's been in frequent contact with a woman named Clara Soto in Miami. She's also 7 months pregnant, and she believes Marcus is divorced, free to start a new life with her. Eleanor felt a wave of nausea. Another one, she whispered, the horror of his pattern deepening. He's booked a one-way flight to Miami for next Tuesday, Thomas continued, his voice grim, the day after Lillian's due date. The full weight of the situation crashed down on Eleanor. Abandonment, his pattern, but then the life insurance policy, the will, the due date, it all clicked into a terrifying mosaic. Thomas voiced the same unspoken fear. Initially, I thought he was simply planning to abandon Lillian and start fresh, as he's done twice before. But the life insurance policy, the will, these suggest something far more sinister than mere abandonment. He wouldn't just walk away from $500,000. Then Thomas revealed the final, most horrifying piece of the puzzle. Marcus has also been extensively researching unlicensed home birth midwives. And he's been actively convincing Lillian that hospital births are dangerous, full of unnecessary interventions, and that she should have a natural, peaceful delivery at home without her regular OBGYN. Eleanor gasped, the pieces snapping together with sickening clarity. He's planning to murder her, she whispered, her voice barely audible. He's planning to stage it as a tragic childbirth complication at home, collect the insurance money, and ride off into the sunset with his new family in Miami. My God. A cold, righteous fury consumed Eleanor. There was no time to lose. She ended the call with Thomas, her mind racing, and raced out the door, driving straight to Lillian's house, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She burst through the front door, not bothering to knock, her eyes scanning for Lillian. She found Marcus in his study, packing a suitcase. He looked up, his expression a mixture of irritation and feigned nonchalance. Eleanor, what is it? I told you to stay away. I'm leaving for a business trip, so this isn't a good time. Eleanor ignored him, pushing past him to where Lillian sat on the sofa, looking pale and exhausted, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Lillian, we need to talk, now. Marcus tried to intercept, but Eleanor fixed him with a stare so venomous it momentarily silenced him. She turned to Lillian, her voice firm and urgent, pulling out her phone and tablet, displaying the damning evidence. Lillian, look. This is Clara Soto. She's also 7 months pregnant. Marcus is moving to Miami to be with her. Here's his one-way flight ticket for next Tuesday. The day after your due date, he's liquidated all his assets, emptied your savings, and taken out credit cards in your name. And he's been researching unlicensed home birth midwives, convincing you that a home birth without proper medical care is safe. Lillian's eyes, dull with exhaustion moments before, widened in disbelief, then slowly, terrifyingly, hardened into a gaze of cold, raw fury. She looked from the images on Eleanor's phone to Marcus, who stood frozen in the doorway, his business trip lie exposed. What is she talking about, Marcus? Lillian's voice was low, trembling with suppressed rage. Marcus quickly regained his composure, reverting to his default mode of gaslighting. She's insane, Lillian. Your mother is unstable. She's fabricating all of this because she can't stand to see us happy. She's always hated me, always tried to drive a wedge between us. He tried to pull Lillian into his arms, but she recoiled, pushing him away. Don't you dare touch me, Lillian said, her voice rising, gaining a newfound steel. The shock had worn off, replaced by an icy, seething rage that Eleanor had never seen in her. Tell me, Marcus, is it true? Are you moving to Miami? Is she pregnant with your child? Is this why you wanted a home birth? Is this why you've been isolating me, stealing from me? Her questions were relentless, each one a hammer blow to his crumbling facade. Answer me, you coward! Marcus's mask finally shattered, his face twisted into a sneer of pure contempt. Fine. You want the truth, Lillian? Yes, I'm leaving. And yes, Clara is 10 times the woman you are. You're a clingy, pathetic mess, a drain on my resources. And as for your precious inheritance, it's mine now. You'll be left with nothing, stuck in this house with a newborn, completely alone, just like you deserve." He laughed, a cruel mocking sound. "You think you can stop me? You'll be financially ruined. You'll have no one. You'll regret this, just like my other foolish wives regretted crossing me." Lillian stood, her pregnant belly a stark reminder of his betrayal, her eyes blazing with an unyielding defiance. "I would rather raise this baby in a cardboard box with nothing but the clothes on my back than spend another minute with a monster like you," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "Get out, Marcus. Get out of my house, now." Marcus stared at her, genuinely surprised by her strength. Then with one last venomous glare, he slammed his study door shut, the sound echoing through the house, leaving behind a silence thick with shattered trust and newfound resolve. Lillian swayed, then collapsed onto the sofa, tears finally flowing, but this time they were tears of fury and heartbreak, not despair. Eleanor rushed to her side, pulling her into a comforting embrace. "We have each other, honey," Eleanor whispered, stroking Lillian's hair. "And we have a plan. He won't get away with this. Not this time." 3 months after the harrowing confrontation, in Marcus's swift eviction, the air in the delivery room was filled not with terror, but with profound relief and overwhelming joy. Baby Aurora Thorne Vance entered the world safely in a state-of-the-art hospital, surrounded by the loving faces of Lillian and Eleanor, along with a team of competent medical professionals. Lillian held her daughter close, tears of exhaustion and pure, unadulterated love streaming down her face. Eleanor watched, her heart swelling with gratitude, knowing they had narrowly escaped a tragedy that would have shattered their lives forever. In the aftermath of Marcus's departure, Lillian, still reeling from the betrayal but now fueled by a fierce protective instinct for her unborn child, worked closely with Eleanor and Thomas Reed. Together they reached out to Clara Soto in Miami. The truth, presented with irrefutable evidence, shattered Clara's world. She was devastated, heartbroken, but also furious at Marcus's monstrous deception. With Lillian and Eleanor's support and evidence from Thomas, Clara bravely went to the police. The arrest was swift and dramatic. Marcus was apprehended at Miami International Airport, attempting to board a flight to a non-extradition country. He was found with a substantial amount of stolen money from Lillian's accounts, multiple fake IDs, and was using a false identity with Clara, who was now instrumental in his capture. The Miami authorities, working in conjunction with Eleanor's legal team, quickly uncovered the depths of his deception. The subsequent investigation unraveled a far wider network of Marcus's predatory behavior. Thomas Reed's team, empowered by the new evidence, meticulously pieced together a mosaic of victims. 7 other women across 3 states came forward, each with a story of financial exploitation, emotional abuse, and cunning manipulation that mirrored Lillian's experience. These women, many with children Marcus had abandoned, were finally given a voice. Crucially, Sofia Mendez, Marcus's second wife, provided evidence that elevated the charges against him. Her testimony revealed not only his pattern of abuse and abandonment, but also connected him to suspicious activities involving fraudulent insurance claims and even questions surrounding the deaths of 2 other women he had been involved with, though these cases remained inconclusive. Emily Watson, his first wife, delivered a chilling account of how she had nearly died during a home birth that Marcus had insisted upon, using an unlicensed midwife who was grossly unqualified. The details were eerily similar to his plan for Lillian. Faced with an avalanche of evidence, fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, and testimony from multiple victims, Marcus Thorne pleaded guilty to a multitude of charges. He was sentenced to a federal prison for 15 years.